Hello, evening everyone watching us at home while you're washing up. Yes, that's what I do. How are you doing? Good, I hope. Welcome to November's newsroom. I'm Stuart, and I'm thrilled to introduce my guest today, Krystian Lamb. As a young man with rheumatoid arthritis, I wanted to speak to him about his journey with the condition, and as we are in Men's Health Awareness Month, get some of his thoughts around mental health. If you've got any questions for my guest, do please put them in the comments now, and we'll get those as and when they come through. Good to see you, Krystian. How are you? I hope you're keeping warm.
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm very warm down here in Jersey. We're obviously a little bit warmer than the rest of the mainland UK, so we're quite lucky. We have been beaten a bit by the weather the last few days. Living on an island, we've got all those sort of offshore winds coming in, sort of buffeting the coast. So yeah, it's been quite nice just to put the radiators on and yeah, just enjoy a bit of warmth on the inside.
Yeah, exactly. Especially as we're moving well into winter, probably like less than a month to go.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's kick off right back at the beginning.
Sure.
Do you want to share with us your diagnosis journey with RA? When were you diagnosed? How did you initially cope with the diagnosis?
Yes. So I was initially diagnosed at the beginning of last summer. And so that was June 2023, between June and July. But my symptoms started in towards the end of March, really. So the turn of spring, starting to get a bit warmer. And I found out whilst I was playing piano, what I discovered was it wasn't actually in my fingers, but it was my toes and my feet whilst I was pedaling. So on the piano, you've got your pedals, and one of them sustains and one of them makes it a bit quieter. And you use them all the time, so they're pretty active. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I need new shoes because my feet are really hurting whilst I'm pedaling. And so I sort of brushed it off because it's quite a sort of, I thought, oh, I'm playing quite a bit at the moment. It might not be too serious. It probably will just fix itself. Maybe I've just been quite vigorous whilst I'm playing. So maybe I've bruised the balls of my feet or something. I don't know. It's sort of just, I don't know, almost making excuses for myself, because something like that happens. You don't really go, oh, it must be rheumatoid arthritis. So I was just saying, yeah, this is part and parcel of just, I don't know, maybe I've been going for some walks, something like that. So I put it to the back of my mind. And then what happened was I was also going for some physio at the same time. And I went to him one morning and I said to him, I've really got a bit of problem. I know I'm coming for something else, but my shoulder is really, really hurting. And I think I must have slept on it funny. And I was in agony. And he started doing some physio work on it. And he just said to me, Krystian, have you ever considered you might have something rheumatological going on? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you've been coming in, I've been looking back through the notes, and you keep getting these quite interesting, quite random sort of bouts of pain, stiffness, in different parts of your body, predominantly around joints, to be honest. So my shoulder, I had something around my knee. And so he said, you honestly might have, you should go and see your doctor and just, have a chat with him about it at some point. And so I said, okay, I'll put that on the back burner. But he just looked at me and said, how many I was sort of mid-20s, 28 at the time. And he said, how many 28-year-olds do you know who sleep funny on their shoulder and then can't move it the next day? And I said, okay, that's fair point. Yes, I'll take that on board. And then I was sort of thinking to myself, I don't really think so. I think I'm quite a fit and healthy guy. I'm recovering from a bit of, I was actually recovering from a bit of long COVID at the time. And so I'd had an encounter with a bit of sort of those type of longer term illness already, but I was on a really good trajectory and on brilliant mend. And then I said, okay, I'll go and have a chat with my doctor. But never really did. And then it was a few weeks later, I was playing and I all of a sudden my fingers were flaring up and I really couldn't play the keys very well at all. And they were stiff and they were not really moving. And that was the moment to me, because it impacted suddenly what I was doing on quite a substantial level, that I thought, oh, this might be something more than what I initially thought. But at that point, I hadn't connected up my feet, the sort of aches, the stiffness, and the agony I was having all over my body, and my fingers. To me, they were all separate symptoms of something completely different. Or maybe I'd slept on my shoulder a bit funny. I was pedaling the piano too vigorously, and I was now all of a sudden. I thought, oh, I've been playing and it's a bit cold outside. I left the doors open. Maybe my fingers have just locked up. But no, so I went, and initially the doctor told me it could be some form of reactive arthritis for whatever reason. So at that point, they told me, no, go away, see how it goes. It might recover in the next few weeks. Of course, it didn't. It progressed, and so I went back and I saw a different doctor this time for a different opinion, and just my regular one who was unavailable initially, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to refer you straight away. We're going to go get scans, we're going to get X-rays. I really want to deal with this up front so we can find out if something is going on." And then I went for my appointment with the rheumatologist, and so he diagnosed me quite quickly, actually, because by this point it manifested a bit more, and it was quite bilateral. It was quite it was in most of my fingers, it was in my toes, it was starting in my knees a little bit, and so he was quite confident in his diagnosis and started me on hydroxychloroquine, a course of steroids for quite a while, and then also some moving on to methotrexate, which currently is not. I've transitioned off because it didn't really agree with me.
Yeah, interesting. And like you said, well, it's interesting you said, it started in the feet, because obviously feet and hands, the small joints, is quite common. But like you said, why would you wouldn't jump straight to RA necessarily, even though it's a condition that can affect anyone at any age, but it's not necessarily the condition that would jump to the forefront of your mind.
Yes, and I think particularly it's a condition which most people associate with it's more sort of middle-aged women, I think, are actually the main target audience of RA. So it's totally off the scope and off the spectrum for someone of my age and my disposition. It's not really the sort of initial target of my diagnosis, I guess. You don't really hear much of 28-year-old guy, rheumatoid arthritis. It must be that. You think, oh, you've probably maybe been, I don't know, exercising a bit too hard. Oh, you've maybe, your shoes are a bit worn, or something like that. It's they tend to steer towards a sort of quite pragmatic diagnosis, which is also a little bit dismissive, I guess, of the possibility. So it's just, I think, knowing your body. I've obviously played piano for over 20 years. So I knew quite instinctively that something was unusual in my hands and my feet. I think by the point I went to the rheumatologist, it was very clear to me this is not a normal diagnosis. I think it's something more akin to a chronic disease, and then of course, rheumatoid arthritis. It wasn't it wasn't the reactive one, or it wasn't you've been playing too much, rest your fingers, which was one of the other comments I think I received from the initial doctor was, oh, maybe just, rest your fingers. It could just be that, which is a fair assessment. But I think you also know how you feel. And I knew to myself, I've experienced that feeling where I've had to rest my fingers before, and it was a bit of a different sensation. And so it's having the sort of inner understanding of yourself to be able to go, no, I know something is uncomfortable and not quite right. And then persisting, which I think is it's very easy as well. Sometimes if you get turned away, you sort of think, oh, I must have just been sort of exaggerating how I was feeling, or maybe something wasn't, I thought something was wrong, but it's not. And then letting it linger, it then progresses into something more substantial. So I think it's having that balance of understanding yourself, listening to the medical advice, but being confident that something isn't quite right inside of you.
Yeah. So I know you thought there was, potentially something, and you mentioned it to the physio, like you just said. Was there anyone else that you spoke to, like right at the beginning when you were thinking about health?
My mum's a nurse, so she's a registered nurse. So she's my first point of contact for for anything, to be honest, health related. She's very knowledgeable about a lot of she's a very experienced nurse, very knowledgeable. So she's to be honest, I think most people in my family and even a lot of close family friends, she's our first point of call. Just that comfort line to say, is this something I should maybe think about? And she's generally got a very good nose for smelling something if it's not quite right as well. She's got that experience, and I think it's one of those things as well. Sometimes there's a bit of underappreciation for the knowledge that nurses have. So I think through my experience, it's quite funny. She's very good at preemptively sort of predicting a diagnosis based on your symptoms, and it's a little bit like house, but she'll go, oh, this and this, and you go in and then you come out and you sort of say, yeah, it was exactly that. And it's so I'm very lucky in that regard. And then I talk to my friends as well. I think I'm quite lucky with my group of friends. I went to an all boys school, so most of my close knit friends are all guys of a similar age, and we're quite open. We talk about our health quite easily. I think we've got quite a good dynamic and sort of free flowing conversation, so we don't really hide too much, which is very which is a real blessing. I think we sort of talk through our experiences. It's not necessarily very common for a lot of guys, because I know it can be quite normal to sort of try and deal with things yourself. So I'm very lucky with that as well. And then of course my fiance is I've run everything by her as well. She's very good at keeping me very I think very calm and very grounded, and saying, okay, that could be something like I don't know. She's been really amazing. We met after my initial diagnosis for RA, but I've known her for about 8 years. We first met at Royal College of Music. We had the same piano professor, and she's been. It wasn't a deterrent to her at all. She's a really wonderful person, a wonderful human who really has been there for me. Pretty much, in fact, one of the reconnecting points. She saw my post online about arthritis, and she messaged me really supportively. So nice. She's very wonderful, and it's really lovely as well. Hopefully if I can inspire any other guys out there, just to say it's possible, to find really wonderful human beings who you can spend your life with, and who look forward to spending their lives with you, even in the the setting of having a chronic diagnosis.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that's why, one of the other reasons that you wanted to speak to everyone that's watching is to, say that you're not alone, and to give some people the confidence to maybe go speak to that close friend.
Not just tell everyone that I'm getting married, which is I wasn't sure if that's what you were. No, we're very excited. I think we're getting married in March. We are definitely getting married in March. Yes, congrats. But it's really exciting. It's one of those surreal experiences, I think, where if at the initial point of diagnosis, someone would have told me this was what's coming my way in the next year and a half, 2 years, I would have just wouldn't be able to compute that. I wouldn't be able to understand all those sort of how I could get from being initially diagnosed to being in a really wonderful place. And it's really taught me the sort of peaks and troughs of life. And we've, on a personal level as well, we had a few family bereavements with some of the elderly members in our family. And some of them were pretty old, sort of over 90 plus. And it's really amazing to see. They had it was actually both my nanny and papa, and so my mum's parents, and they were totally in love for the whole of their life, married for an enormously long length of time. And it was so I'm very jealous of that time they got to spend with each other. And then in the context of this sort of diagnosis, where the first thing I sort of thought about, one of the first things was a chronic diagnosis. Does that mean how long what's the long-term impact of this? Am I only going to, how many years do I have? Do I have sort of 5, 10, 20? And of course we don't know how many we're all going to have. But it's one of those where before that point, I felt fairly immortal and you sort of feel young, healthy, and you just think life keeps going on forever. And okay, I don't really need to think about these long-term, a lot of these longer term aspects of life, which you can sort of take for granted. And then instantly, one of the first thoughts through my head upon diagnosis was, what? Well, oh, I've got some real some challenges now, which are going to affect me for the rest of my life. Not just a short-term challenge and then I overcome it and then great, it's out the way, which is much more akin to doing lots of piano performances. Is you have sort of short-term, or you have a deadline, you prepare for the performance, you sort of complete the performance, you have an amazing time, and then okay, that's done. And sort of all the way through school, you're sort of looking at exams. COVID was the first point really where I experienced some sort of issues with health. I caught COVID in March 2020, so just before the first lockdown, especially in Jersey. It took another week or two to lock down, and I became quite ill with a lot of sort of very strange symptoms then, and that was my first sort of inkling of, oh, okay, life can be very interesting. I'd been riding a lot of peaks, to be honest. I'd been very, very lucky in my life up until that point. And then that sort of, taught me, okay, life is not just a sort of linear graph up as you sort of work hard. You have all this youthful energy. You keep working hard, and then, you get rewards for working hard, and then you continue that cycle and your sort of career progresses. So I would have been about 24 at the time, and I was working at a Big Four accounting firm. So I studied at the Royal College of Music, graduated, and then decided, okay, I want to pay off my student loan and set up my composition studio. And so I was sort of looking at different options, and I thought, okay, a really fantastic option was going and joining one of the Big Four accounting firms, getting some professional experience in a different industry, and then transitioning back into music. So it was supposed to be sort of a short, sharp sort of stepping stone back to London, and then continuing my music career from that point. And then COVID hit, and then I suffered with quite a lot of COVID symptoms. And that was my first point where I had to say, okay, your life has ups and downs, and I've been riding this amazing wave for quite a long time. Things have been going really, really well. Now I've got to see how much grit have I got, because all of a sudden, a lot of the things I could do were a bit less accessible. And then I had a lot of support recovering from that. And it was actually the first performance, the initial arthritis symptoms occurred after the first performance I did after my COVID sort of journey. I had a bit of a journey for sort of 18 months with the COVID, getting back into a really, really good place, actually. And then I did my first piano performance since then, my first public performance. And then a few days after, I had the initial arthritis symptoms. So it was a real sucker punch to me at that point, because I thought just as I was starting to, reach another peak, instantly I started sort of seeing this, something resisting, some form of resistance sort of pushing back against me as I was trying to sort of move forward. And what I've learned now through my RA journey so far is there's lots and lots of ups and downs, and it's important for me anyway to have lots of passions to keep me driven. That's one of the coping mechanisms I use, is having passions, things that I sort of want to do beyond pain, that I will do through pain. So something like, I don't know, just sitting and listening to Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto is something, a piece of music I can always turn to, no matter how dire things are around me. Sit there and just find a bit of solace. And it's that sort of transcendental experience, listening to music and engaging with music. So that's one of my passions, and I've got multiple passions. So I'm very lucky, I think, personally, to be a sort of a passionate human being. And to me, it makes that sort of bouncing back from the troughs so much more appealing. Because one of the things, I guess, one of the sort of crossroads I hit, or I don't know if other people hit, but that sort of present themselves to you when you do hit those lows, are, which path do I take? Do I try and sort of claw myself out of this and crawl out and try and get back to a point where I'm, I'm living again? maybe not in the same way, maybe not with the same capacity or the same functionality, but find a point where I am living? Or do I take the other road and I sort of fall into that sort of that quagmire of the symptoms running my life? And okay, I have days where my knuckles ache and playing the piano is really agonizing, and I just want to pretend I don't have fingers, or just scream. And but then I sort of take a step back and go, do you know what? The work I'm doing, I can sort of press play on what I've just been doing.
Yeah.
And I just, all of a sudden, I just go, okay, this really hurts. My hands really hurt, but I've just produced something through that pain.
Yes.
And anyone listening might not be able to hear the notes themselves. They wouldn't maybe be able to sort of comprehend that someone who's written this, every single stroke of their finger has been excruciating or agonizing. And that was sort of the context of a composition album I produced last year and released this year. Yes.
So I just wanted to come in on that one. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, obviously in the hands, being a pianist, that's going to have a major impact on you. Is there anything like exercise, or you've touched on it in terms of music being a massive passion, but is there any sort of exercise that you've got in order to maintain your
So what I do is I actually do really slow piano exercises. So something in particular, so I just do very simple slow scales. So if I've got a piano here, I can or a keyboard, I can demonstrate, but there won't be any sound, but just very slow movements, doing very simple slow scales, really gently, just to try and keep those just the fingers moving and the knuckles moving without stressing out any of the tendons, without stressing out any of the joints, without engaging. Because I actually recently, in the last month or so, was diagnosed with I think it's modest bilateral carpal tunnel. So I've got carpal tunnel in both my wrists at the moment. So I'm just being extra gentle, and some of that's just well, I say this, it's not really that common in pianists of my age, but I suppose pianists of my age with rheumatoid arthritis, it's a lot more, probably it's a smaller sample size. So it's common in a lot of pianists who've been performing, well, not so common, but it does occur in artists and pianists who are sort of quite a lot more advanced in their life. So a lot of elderly pianists will have might encounter sort of more carpal tunnel type symptoms. It tends to be the office secretary condition sometimes if they've been typing away all their life. But it is just it's made it a bit more in the last few weeks, just a bit more cumbersome. I can really feel the fingers in my sort of midsection of my hand a bit less responsive. So I'm just trying really gently just to move engage the sort of the nerves through the carpal tunnel without inflaming them. And so I've got a few exercises for that. But the arthritis itself, beyond playing piano, I mean, playing piano is like gymnastics for your hands. So it's not a very accessible exercise regime for most people. But for me, when I sort of spoke with rheumatologists and my doctors, they said, to be honest, a lot of the exercises you've got for your piano are going to be very, very beneficial if you can do them in a way where they're not over engaging the fingers. So there's this set of series of finger exercises by a composer called Docniani, and so you sort of hold down multiple notes at once and then play with the other ones. And if you just do them sort of very slowly, you can engage your fingers, keep them mobile without damaging the wrist a lot, and without damaging your nerves, and without engaging the knuckles and the fingers. But it's an interesting predicament, because the first thing which I've sort of taken out my repertoire is I've reduced a lot of virtuosic pieces. So I found pieces like Liszt, Prokofiev, some of the a lot of the difficult Rachmaninoff, those type of pieces just don't really lend themselves very well, because you're fighting a war of attrition with them anyway. And so I've sort of removed them from my repertoire, the type of pieces that I'm sort of if I play now a more Chopin, a lot of the sort of the softer romantics, I suppose, people like Mozart, Beethoven, some the later Beethoven sonatas get quite crazy again, and he didn't really care about your hand shapes. He just wrote pieces and said, these are the notes, play them.
Yes.
And so
Like
so they're
some
also just being careful. Yeah, whereas Chopin was he was a really interesting figure in music, in particular piano, because he had a really fantastic understanding of the ergonomics of the hands. So he had this ability to look at the shape of the hands and start incorporating a lot more wrist movement into the hands, and saying, so there's let's say we've got these notes, well, you can't really necessarily see, but you've got an octave as 8 notes, and for most people that's pretty comfortably between the distance between their sort of thumb and their 5th finger. Depending on how big your hand size is, I know people who can sort of reach 13, 14 notes quite comfortably, and they really enjoy playing big, loud pieces. But for me, I can reach about a 10th, so it's an octave plus 2, really. But Chopin came up with the idea, really, of, well, what if we adjust our wrist shape, and then all of a sudden we can go from reaching this distance between your thumb and your 5th finger, we can incorporate that into different smaller chunks. So we can now do the distance between your thumb and your 2nd finger, and then the distance between your 2nd and your 3rd, and then the distance between your 3rd and your 5th. So all of a sudden we've taken sort of the limitations of the octave or the hand and extended them, and now you can all of a sudden play motions where you can really get up to sort of those much higher notes and extend the repertoire. So he had a really good understanding of what to do with the hand, and the wrist in particular, without damaging it, I think, and what it's good at. So it's very good at sort of going in this direction, and very good at coming back in this direction, like so. But going up in this direction is not very natural, and coming down in this direction is also not very natural. So in a lot of Chopin pieces, what you'll see is you'll come down with your wrist, and this is one of his etudes, and you'll come over and you'll go down with your wrist and your hand position that side, and you'll come up with your wrist position and your hand this side. So it's he had a really good understanding. So nothing's very that's actually not true. It's all very, very difficult musically. But it fits very nicely under the hands for the majority of people's hand shapes.
Right, let me just make a quick announcement. So don't forget, if you're in our audience, you have questions that you'd like me to ask Krystian, please do pop them in the comments on whichever platform you're watching this on. They'll all come through to the system that we're using. So, Krystian, if we talk about work, obviously, you know, pianist, lots of knowledge, way more than I have around all the piano stuff. What other adjustments? So I know you said you had to take some of the more complicated pieces out of your repertoire.
Yes.
Have you had to make other adjustments to allow you to continue to play the piano? So
one of the decisions I made was I basically don't really perform now since the RA diagnosis, and part of that is the I think the commitment you make when you're a pianist is you say, on this specific day, at this specific time, at this specific moment, I'm going to perform, and I'm going to perform to a certain level, and the audience is going to have a fantastic time. And one of the things I think that RA sometimes does take away from me anyway is that ability to make that commitment at that specific time on that specific date. So I've stopped doing those type of performances. And what I'm very lucky that my main passion with music is composition. And although I studied as a concert pianist, and that was my primary, I did lots of composing alongside and of equal value. So as I've been getting older, it's much more an important part of my livelihood and my life. So I've transitioned from performing as a performing pianist to a composing pianist, I suppose, and particularly sort of cinematic style music. I have a agreement with a contract with a sync agency called Theatrax, who they focus on Dolby Dolby Atmos specialities. So they pre-master all their music on their platform for Dolby ready. So it means that if a music supervisor, who's someone, let's say, who works on a Netflix TV show, wants a piece of music, or and they want it to be Dolby Atmos ready, Theatrax, all their pieces are already pretty much done and dusted, and they can just take them. So that's, the industry is a bit more, it is very much more agency based there now. So you can't really just, write a piece of music, send an email to the music supervisor on a program, and they'll look at it. There's too many legal loopholes and legal hurdles to get over.
Yeah.
So a lot of music supervisors now will just go direct to these sync agencies, music licenses, and just say, okay, what can I take from yours? And they all pitch as well for a lot of projects, and they'll say, we've got these artists, we've got these tracks, we think it would work for your upcoming project. So I've got an agreement with them. So that's where I'm sort of spending a bit of my time musically, compositionally. But to be honest, a lot of the composition I've been doing in the last year and a half since the diagnosis has been very personal. Just as I've been sort of getting my feet back on the ground and expressing myself through my music. So Introspection was my sort of Arthritis album. It's how I processed all my emotions, processed my sort of my feelings, definitely.
Yeah.
Particularly, I've never been one of those people who's had struggled with their mental health specifically. But to me, I detox all the time, and I'm cleansing all the time through my music. And so I feel like I've got this really lucky outlet to channel a lot of my, I guess, my inner self, my inner. If I have any inner turmoil, I can channel it through music, and I can put it out to the world so that it's no longer sort of in me. It's now out into the ether, and I can, I can deal with it that way. So that's something I've been very lucky with. And so I've been taking I did another album earlier this year. It was about 50 piano pieces in liaison with Darrell Wildlife Conservation Trust, who are a big international conservation society and trust, and they go around the world trying to save and help endangered species. So they did this event called the Tortoise Trail, and it involved a collaboration with about 50 different artists, and plus more. Actually, it was over 100 artists, but they had these 50 big giant tortoises, and then they had some smaller tortoises. And so I wrote a piece for each of the large 50 tortoises, and then have released that as well in collaboration with them. So that's something I've been doing as well. I've been looking a little bit close to home recently, just to try and draw inspiration from Jersey. It's such a beautiful island, such an amazing place, that I've just been trying to draw some inspiration, engage with lots of local artists. I've got a lot of my links and network is with London, where I studied, and a lot of people professionally I know there. And I don't really feel like I've engaged as much in Jersey as I would have liked to. And I think it's important to me. It's the place I grew up. It's the place I spent so much of my life. And especially during something like COVID, just having those long beaches to walk down when, you think of people in big cities where they've, I don't know, they can walk down the street, but it can, after a bit of time, get really, claustrophobic.
Yeah.
It was such a marvel to just be able to look across this beach and go, wow. So I've been trying to sort of liaise with a lot more local artists in the last year or two, and before I possibly move back to London maybe in the next few years. Possibly I'll probably stay between the two, commuting and trying to make the most of both, because it's I think music lives in the city, to be honest, but I think my inspiration lives here. In terms of the industry is very much London based, but in terms of just the natural beauty that the island has, it's wonderful to have that option.
All adds into it, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's a total plug for anyone watching to come over and visit the island. You hopefully wouldn't be disappointed. It's a really beautiful place.
I do want to come over. I want to see what Jersey's like.
Absolutely. I can show you around.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so we're rapidly running through time, which is really good. But and I do want to get to some mental health questions. Do you want to just take 1 or 2 minutes just to go through a piece that you've composed?
Yes, sure.
As long as the tech is working.
Yes, if the tech is. So a bit of context around this piece. This is called a royal visit to Jersey. So earlier on this year, King Charles came over to Jersey to, I think, just visit the island. It was very ceremonial. And I am a member of the faculty at the Jersey Academy of Music. So I, on behalf of them and me, we composed a piece just to sort of commemorate his visit. So this is a piece called A Royal Visit to Jersey. So it's predominantly the principle of the Jazz Academy music as a flautist. So I wrote a piece incorporating the flute, and it starts with traditional sort of royal drumming, I suppose is the best way to describe it. So assuming the setup works at some point, here we go. Yes. So if I just start this again and adjust a bit of the volume. If I stop it there for a little second, so this is what's called essentially the master track. So the way I work my composition process is I compose from the piano, and I have what's called instrumental sample libraries. So I will play the piano, but the sound that comes out will be a violin or a flute or a cello, whatever instrument I want. So those drums at the beginning, you basically have a library of sounds and instruments, and so I took the sound of the drum and then I perform it on the piano. So it's how a lot of the modern cinematic music is composed now, is they will start by taking these libraries. And so you have a sound. So if I press, it won't work now, but if I press that, it would sound like a snare drum, one hit of a snare drum. And so if I compose and do that, it will sound like a roll on a snare drum. So the trick is to try and make it sound to the listener like they're not samples. And so the way that you do that is percussive sounds are great because they've got very strong attacks, very short decays, and they sound very punchy. So all the work is done in that initial moment of impact, so they sound very real. Something like a legato string, so where you get long, smooth Hollywood sounds, where you've got these big, John Williams melodies, where they sort of go, they're quite long, smooth. They're very difficult to recreate because all the magic that happens there is in the transition between the notes and the sort of the shape, what's called the shaping. So if you imagine you've got a note and it starts soft and then it gets very loud, that's sort of like a very basic shape. And all the magic is achieved through that, which is very difficult to recreate electronically. So a lot of people at the moment in the industry are trying to work on how do I create these magic shapes and transitioning what's called true legato, where you blend from one note into the next. They're the biggest challenges at the moment for the sample industry, because what tends to happen is they sound quite janky. So you sort of get like a nice shape in one note, and then all of a sudden as it transitions into the next, you have a sort of a cutoff point, and you can, if you know what you're listening for, you can hear it quite substantially. But you can, a lot of the music actually on TV series now, it is predominantly sample based with live musicians blended in. So the flute player, the flautist here, was live. So if I just jump a little bit further along, if you can see here, I've got about 60 different tracks laid out. So that combination of one big chunk just before was all of these 60 lines individually combined. So if I play and talk over this, maybe you can see I've got, this is what each individual instrument's doing. I'm just scanning through. I think I mute at some point and I solo on the instruments, and you can see the flute on its own. So this is the flute line on its own. And so it's, and you do this as a technique called layering. And so essentially what you do is you can layer stacks of instruments on top of each other to thicken out the sound. And so all of a sudden it goes from sounding like an individual instrument to sounding more like an orchestra. So this is a sort of quite delicate piano.
Nice.
And so and then sorry,
You're
yes,
gonna
I
have to
think
cut
that's,
this bit short, I'm afraid,
yeah, that's
Krystian,
fine.
because
And then
we're
this is
running
the
out of
score.
time.
The flute score. So yeah, there you can see I just wrote everything out to give the flautist, who then performed it straight off because she's a fantastic flute player. And so, yes, there we go. That's
Nice.
sort of a quick insight into the compositional process.
No,
So
it
it
is
starts with
fascinating.
piano with samples, into then a mix of sort of all the tracks. Then you record the live musicians who you want, you blend them in, you take out the fake tracks or the sort of the electronic, and then you master it all into one track, which you then sort of do the sort of, it's called the dark arts of mastering at the end.
Certainly sounds like it. Right. Just want to do a couple of mental health questions.
Sure, yes.
So have you found that RA has, especially more maybe towards the beginning, how it impacted your self-esteem and self-confidence?
Yes, I feel like I'm one of those lucky people who's always pretty confident in myself. However, I think that's probably one of the only times in my life I thought what really scared me was initially I didn't feel like I had any type of control over it, and I didn't have any, I felt like it was just going to run wild. And to me, that was terrifying. I felt like it was something inside of me which I didn't really want to be there. Very sort of like an alien invader doing something to me that I felt like it doesn't matter what I do, it's going to just take over.
Yeah.
And the way that was allayed, the way that was sort of taken away from me, actually, I think, and the way I realized that wasn't the case was some of it was just time. I think a lot of it was the initial appointments with I was really lucky to have great health professionals helping me through. So the nurses, the rheumatology nurses, the consultant as well. They were very reassuring, and they were firm, and they wanted me to understand the significance of the diagnosis. But they also were very, realistic in terms of, look, there will be bad days, but there will be good days too.
Yeah.
And that initial sort of glimmer of hope where, oh, not every day is going to be bad, was really important to me, because I tend to be quite an optimistic person in general. I like to see the brighter side. I like to look at the positive outcomes versus the risk and the I don't really spend too much time dwelling on the what ifs, because otherwise I feel like they're quite paralyzing to me, especially if I start thinking about the what ifs. Because I'm quite a creative person in general, I can get quite creative with those what ifs, and I can create very comfortably what ifs that are just ludicrous and really unlikely. So I tend to know that about myself, which is, I think, a very important something I'm very lucky for as well, to have a little bit of self-awareness of sort of accepting that I am that type of person who could, exacerbate something by thinking into it. So I try to realize that and work on that specifically, and sort of aim for, okay, well, this could be the benefits. This could be great if I did this. Okay, these things could happen. These things could inhibit me. Okay, I could wake up and my fingers couldn't be moving that day. Okay, great. What can I do today? Even if my fingers aren't. And it's sad. And I'm also quite lucky. I'm not very, I never beat myself up. I know if I've tried my best at something, and that's enough for me.
Yeah.
So I don't really beat myself up. And again, I think that's something I learned through performance, there's never a perfect performance. And so I've learned quite early on, if you are going to treat yourself like that, it's going to be a very painful, long, and very unrewarding journey. So just enjoy that experience of going up to perform, try and give, something back to the audience. And that's still my attitude now, is sort of, okay, I've got these experiences with RA, and now how can I sort of, give back something, even if it's just my experience, even if it just helps one person, that just inspiration of, okay, there are good days too, and your life can continue. And it might not necessarily continue in the same way. I know mine's very different. My journey in the last sort of year and a half, 2 years, has been completely different to what it would have been without that RA diagnosis. But in many ways, it has been so much more fulfilling and so much more interesting than I possibly could have imagined.
So one final question from me then,
Yes.
and then we'll see what the audience has to say. What's one piece of advice that you would give to men who are struggling with their mental health issues?
Wow. I think it's such a big topic. I don't know. I think it's
Or
very
is it
easy to say.
speak
Well,
to?
I think it's such a difficult question because it's such a big topic, and it's so individualized. I'm one. It's very easy for me to go and say talk to your friends, but what if you don't have many friends? It's very easy for me to say go and talk to your health professional, but what if you're not very comfortable going and talking to your health professional? I mean, there's lots of guidance and support, and I think people really well placed who are trying to increase and improve the amount of support. I mean, for me, I always I think it's such a I don't even think we fully understand how mental health works yet. I think I'm very lucky in that I'm open. I try not to keep anything inside if I can tell it to someone. I'm lucky. I've got a fantastic relationship with my mother, my father, my mum, dad, and all my friends. I've got lots of people I can talk to.
Yeah.
So I think talking about it and understanding yourself is the first thing. I think as well. I would say there is always a good day further down the line. So that's something I would say is life can get very difficult. But that doesn't mean you have to sort of lie down and accept it. I think I don't really know if I'm perfectly well placed since I've never really had such sort of difficult mental health problems. I've had lots of physical problems that I've had to that I felt like I've ground through and had to grind through and push through and claw my way through. But in terms of mental health in general, I think there's a lot of amazing support out there, a lot of amazing charities.
Yep.
I think
Also, local
yes,
GPs.
local
Speak to
GPs.
GPs.
Yes, I think it's really fantastic that men's mental health is becoming much more of a topic. I know
Yes.
it's been quite diminished in the last few years, and it's been sort of suppressed a little bit. I think it's not been one of the main topics, but I know recently it's becoming much more prevalent. There's loads of influencers, loads of podcasts, loads of streamers all talking about men's mental health now and
Yeah.
addressing a lot of the issues. Like the suicide rate in young men is phenomenally high. I think it's actually the biggest group of I don't want to misspeak, but I think I'm right in saying that it is the biggest group of sort of self-harm fatality is young men in my sort of age bracket, just a bit below me. And it is a fundamental problem. I think it's an interesting place at the moment as well, the world for young men, because I don't really think they know their place in society and they're struggling a bit to find it. And for someone like me, I'm very lucky that I've sort of found different communities to be in, which are I'm very lucky. And I hope that one interesting or different piece of advice would be go out and find some people who are interested in the same things as you. Find something you're passionate about and try and find like-minded people who are also passionate about the same things. Because I think having a community and people you can talk to and not necessarily about the things that are your sort of demons can help you look at those demons in a different way, maybe. But again, I'm not sure I've got enough personal experience to really
No, it's
help
fair
in that
enough.
regard.
You're right. It is reach out to someone who you trust. If you don't have
Yes,
anyone within your circle that is suitable, then definitely like the local GP is probably a good
yes,
place to start as well.
yes.
So that's all the questions I've got. So let's have a quick look at
Yeah.
some of the questions from audience. So Clive on YouTube said, if you spend any length of time in an RA clinic, you soon start to realize how many different age groups are attending. Very true. As we said right at the
Yes,
beginning, RA
absolutely.
is, anyone at any
Yeah.
age. It can be the full spectrum.
Yes.
But it's also 2 to 3 times more women than men.
Yes.
Um, Stuart, when are you going to tickle those ivories behind you? This is just a picture, so we won't be doing that. Plus, I cannot play anything. We'll leave that to Krystian. And I think a question for you, Krystian, what are some of your favourite pieces to play? And do you find certain types of music more therapeutic or manageable to perform? Obviously, you've mentioned
Yes.
something around that, but is there anything
Yes.
else you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think sort of a collection of pieces that I always love playing through are the Chopin nocturnes. They're very, very beautiful pieces. The nocturne is sort of a music of the night, so they're quite reflective pieces, which they use very interesting harmonies. They're very, very melodic, and I'm a big fan of melody. So very quite slow. A few of them are fairly slow. They're not virtuosic in the same way that sort of if you're jumping around the piano, like doing lots of Liszt pieces. So definitely Chopin nocturnes, I've got a very soft spot for them. And my favorite is probably the later E flat major one, which is, it's almost as if Bach wrote a romantic nocturne. It's got lots of little intricate lines in the middle and inside voices, which to me are just really, really magical.
Nice. Cool. Okay, I think we're basically out of time. So thank you so much, Krystian, for giving up your time tonight. It's really appreciated. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in or watching this back on demand. We are taking a break from our NRAS lives in December, but I believe our next topic is on stress in January. So if that's of interest to you and you want to hear all the latest news from NRAS, make sure you sign up to our free newsletter, nras.org.uk/newsletter. We're on all the socials: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, I refuse to call it X, LinkedIn, and the free forum Health Unlocked, which anyone can sign up to. Again, thanks for watching. Take care. Hope you have a great Christmas, and goodbye for now.